Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Hines with Just Among Friends. I'm your co-host here, along with Ann Stacy of Texans for a Safe Israel and Mike Isley with Texans for Israel. And I have a Taste of Israel. Welcome to another episode of Just Among Friends, where we host speakers who help us align with our mission of cultivating hearts to love the Jewish people and the land of Israel. We're excited to bring you today's guest speaker. We hope that you will share this far and wide. This is a very important topic we're going to be talking about today. So if you guys are ready, let's get started. We want to welcome today's speaker, who is Danny Ehrlich. Danny is the Vice President and Educational Director at Keshet Educational Journeys in Israel. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you. Before we dive into the heart of the subject matter, I want to turn the mic, so to speak, the Zoom mic, over to Ann. I want Ann to tell our audience how we got here today. Here we are in 2021 on Zoom with, Danny Ehrlich. Ann, tell us how we got here today.
Well, in May, Sandra Osterbars came to my home, and we were sitting out just having a nice morning here on Lake Granbury. And she said, "Ann, how'd you get to be the way that you are?" And I said, "Well, about 20 years ago, I went with Billy Brim Ministries to Israel, and she used Orthodox Jewish guides who lived mainly behind the Green Line, or in Samaria or Judea." And I said, there was this one guy, and it's when I really knew that the Jews believed in God. I guess I hadn't ever met it. Well, no, I didn't know that. I had no idea that the Jews believed in God, loved God. But this guy I knew was connected to God. And she said, "Was it Danny Ehrlich?" And I said, 20 years now have passed. Don't ask me to go through and introduce my friends to you. But I said, I think the fellow's name was Danny. I said, let me call my husband, because he was as taken with this fella as I was. And I called him, and I got him on the phone, and he said, yes, that was the name. And so anyway, that Just Among Friends has brought us together again after 20 years. So I'm delighted. I hope that Danny comes to our home in Texas and visits Austin and Amarillo and teaches us about the Holocaust.
Thank you. And I love that segue into where we're at today, why we're here today with you, Danny, on Just Among Friends. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today, the Holocaust. So I want to ask, I want to say something and ask our audience a question. So understanding that for Jews, the Holocaust is but one chapter in the history of Christian anti-Semitism, past and present, is key to building bridges between Christians and Jews. Unaddressed, the issue of Christian anti-Semitism is like that proverbial elephant in the room, preventing deeper connections and relationships. Look, guys, not all Christians are ready, able, and willing to learn about this. Are you ready to hear this interview with Danny Ehrlich about the Holocaust and Christian anti-Semitism? It's a sombering topic, but we believe it's one that we need to hear. Danny, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's interesting. The Holocaust is a very upsetting and depressing topic, and yet I believe, as an issue of discussion between Jews and Christians, it can be very freeing and opening up of doors which are closed until now. I can remember, it was a lot of years ago already. I can't remember how many years ago, but one of the first times that I guided a Christian group at Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Memorial and Museum. And it was actually a fascinating group of people. It was pastors and missionaries from around the world who had come to Israel on some seminar, and it was a very intense experience. And at the end, as we were talking after the tour, we were talking informally, and I remember one of the missionaries, they were British, and I think they were in Africa somewhere as missionaries. They thanked me for the teaching, and I remember he said, you know, he says, I knew something about the Holocaust, but he says, I had no idea of the over 1,000 years of Christian anti-Semitism. And to me, this is one of those aha moments, or, you know, eye-opening. For Jews, we might not know, there are Jews who don't know much about Judaism. There are Jews who know nothing, little to nothing about Christianity, certainly, but they know one thing: the Christians hate us Jews. That they know. And to have an educated person saying to me, I knew about the Holocaust a little bit, but I never knew that there was a history of Christian anti-Semitism, made me stop and think. And then I thought about it, and I said, well, where would he have learned about it? In church Sunday school? In American or British social studies classes, in school? Who was teaching it? There was no one to teach it. So, so often we have our assumptions of what is and what people know, and they don't match reality. And so for me, there was an opening there, I thought, and I've taught so many Christian groups and churches and groups that come to Israel about the Holocaust, and helping them to understand this lens that it's not just the Holocaust. Holocaust, as you said, it's the latest chapter, if you will, or a recent chapter in an ongoing history. I mean, sometimes what they say about the British and the Americans were divided by a common language. And the same thing sometimes with Jews and Christians. We use some of the same terminology and some of the same texts, but we're sometimes reading them very, very differently. So for example, the term Christian love in a Jewish context is a laugh line. Christian love? Christian hate. What Christian love? And you have centuries and centuries of church and government sponsored hatred of Jews, persecution of Jews throughout Christian dominated lands, combined with occasional massacres, expulsions, keeping Jews from being able to be in society. You have over 1,000 years of this in Christian Europe. And this is a very, very difficult issue.
Yes. Yes, I was just going to say that, there's so much to be said here, and unfortunately we won't be able to cover it all in this one episode, but we definitely want to give it our best shot, which is, this is really what our mission is at Just Among Friends. It is to cultivate hearts to align with the Jewish people and the land of Israel. But on a deeper level, it's to as Ian has always said, turn the direction of this ship away from replacement theology back to the Jewish people. And we have had speakers on here there's a common thread here with our speakers, and they all point to what you're saying. Why aren't the Christians learning this? Well, because exactly, no Christian entity is going to teach this, but we're trying to do our very best. And the evidence of what you're talking about is at Yad Vashem. The evidence of Christian anti-Semitism. It's all over. And we've had another speaker who's on the same topic. So dear God, let this just expand and more Christians hear this, because it is important for us to hear, and it is very freeing. I'm so appreciative of you saying that.
When Jews speak to Christians, I can, look, I started reaching out to Christians back in the 1980s. And maybe even a little before. I was a student Zionist activist in the U.S. in the 1970s and 1980s, and began to come across people who were saying, we stand with Israel, and then I realized, but they're not Jewish. And they said, no, we're proudly Christian, but we stand with Israel. And then, of course, the immediate response was, oh, so you want to convert us, right? You're a missionary. Look, we've known two kinds of Christians throughout most of our history: those who come to kill us, and those who come to convert us.
Right.
And you'll forgive me, frankly, we're not inviting either of those to dinner. It's a real problem. And there've been too many times in history where Christians came with the guise of friendship only to have it turn into hate. I mean, look, the most the most prominent example of this, and maybe the most problematic example, and I think we can find ways of bridging it, but we have to first recognize it, is Martin Luther.
Yes.
Now, look, the Catholic Church had had replacement theology. Their idea was keep, St. Augustine already taught, don't kill the Jews, he said, scatter them, keep them down, as an example of what happens to those who stand against God. And from those teachings came the idea, well, if the Jews killed God, right, deicide, and they are therefore the enemy of God, this is the earliest days of the church, who's that figure that's anti-God? Satan. And it became a very easy, it's A equals B equals C. If the Jews are the enemies of God and Satan is the enemies of God, therefore the Jews must be of Satan. And you already have early church fathers suggesting that perhaps the Jews are not descendants of Adam and Eve, but descendants of the devil. And that's where you'll get the pictures, of Jews with horns. Jews will be forced to wear special marks, which again, the Nazis will reuse this, but this goes back centuries. And so the idea that, so within the church, there's a wonderful book. I mean, it's a very disturbing book, Constantine's Sword. Written by, actually, he's a former Catholic priest. He's got all sorts of issues with the Catholic Church. He could have cut the book in half if he had left those issues out. But he makes such an important statement. He says, anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem, it's a Christian problem. We have to suffer from it. He says, we as Christians have to address it internally because it gnaws at our soul as Christians.
Wow.
And it's a powerful statement.
It is a powerful statement. I want to add to that, a quote from Corrie ten Boom. She says, 4 marks of true repentance are, number 1, acknowledgement of wrong. Number 2, willingness to confess it. 3, willingness to abandon it, and willingness to make restitution. And if Christians can grab on, first of all, step number 1 is realizing the atrocities, the deplorable history of the church against the Jews. And I think we're making headway. I know there's a brand new, I would say, group or remnant of Christians who now, thank God, are seeing that and understanding the truth behind it. But if we can take Corrie ten Boom's words and bring it even further, we will make significant change. And God forgive us for what has happened to the Jewish people at the hands of Christianity. And I know that you have something to ask. Let's open up. If you want to unmute yourself, please go right ahead.
Well, I'd like to ask, the teaching that I found on
Christian Friends of Israeli Communities.
Yes, Christian Friends of Israeli Communities was quite long, but it was wonderful. How would people find how would we find other teachings by you?
Well, we could put together a shorter teaching. That's one thing that we can do. Look, there's been a lot of good books. I don't have them at my fingertips, but certainly good books that are readable, that help explain, in terms of what has happened. And there's certainly good articles, which I'll be happy to forward. But I think just some basic reading and being open to understanding, what happened. And again, it's not just a question of the Holocaust. We were just talking briefly about Martin Luther. So, the Catholic Church had this idea of replacement theology very strongly, persecute the Jews, keep them down over the centuries. Now, Martin Luther, with the Reformation, who did such important things in terms of Reformation, starts out with his idea, and this is where it gets difficult for Jews looking at Christians who come and say, but we're your friends. And he says, listen, the reason the Jews haven't accepted Jesus in their lives is because we've treated them atrociously. If we would treat them with love, then they'll come. Well, so he starts in that direction. It's a good beginning. But then, what happened? It turns out we're Jews. We weren't becoming Christians. We were thrilled that there were, that Christians, embraced God But Christians were going to be Christians, Jews were going to be Jews. Now, when that became clear to Martin Luther, he became one of the worst anti-Semites in history. He went from being someone who said, let's embrace the Jewish people, to becoming one of the main vectors and sources of anti-Semitism that the world has known. And again, the Nazis will draw on him very strongly. And that's always the fear, lurking in the back of our minds. Not so much mine, but I've met, look, I'm looking at you, at Lori, at Aunt Stacy, at Mike, and so many of the marvelous Christians who I've met, and you're swimming upstream. I mean, there's thousands of, there's, over 1,500 years, let's say, of Christian anti-Semitism. There's all the church dogmas that came down through the centuries, even though the texts are pretty clear that it shouldn't go that way. And to swim against that, to fight against that, that's not easy. And that's something that certainly, look, have friends and been working with Christians who have embraced the Jewish people, I'd say now for 40 years. It's enriched my life in a way that you can't imagine. Because look, I grew up in New York, very strong Jewish community, Orthodox family, and we were friendly with non-Jews, but we didn't have any friends who were non-Jews. We were only amongst ourselves. There was always the assumption that there are enemies. My father was born in Vienna, Austria. He was in 1937 when Austria is the Anschluss, made part of the Nazi German Reich. He was 7 years old, and he lived 2 years under Hitler. And by great miracle, he, his parents, and his sister managed to make it to the United States, and that's why they survived. But they made it in September of 1939 as the war was beginning. All my father's relatives, his aunts, his uncles, his cousins, except for one first cousin who had made it to Tel Aviv in the 1930s, and the more distant relatives who had made it to the United States, were all murdered in the Holocaust. And so I was born in 1958, after the Holocaust, looking back, and my father was a boy. But for his parents, my grandparents, the specifics of the Holocaust was a surprise. But having grown up in Europe, where the local priest was the one who would set the mob upon you because you were Jewish. Now, when I was growing up in New York, my parents were amazed that when we thought about who can we turn to if we need help, right? We're kids, what do we need help? Well, a policeman, maybe the crossing guard, a fireman, and a clergy person. It could be a Christian, or a Jew. My parents, I remember they were shocked at the idea that we would have this worldview that we could turn to Christians, because when they grew up, Christians, those are the ones who are attacking you. Why would you go to them for help? A nun or a priest was exactly the people that were whipping up the mob to attack the synagogue, to attack Jews in the streets. Look, terms, again, Christmas is a time of great joy for Christians. Easter, a time of great meaning. Or Resurrection Sunday. For Jews in the Christian lands in Europe, these were times of horror. These are times when Jews would be massacred, set upon. If a Jew dared to walk in the street and maybe look at one of the images being carried, he'd be accused of desecrating the images. Jews would be accused throughout the centuries. I mean, to us, it sounds so ridiculous until we remember that unfortunately there are millions of Christians today who still believe some of this. Jews would be accused of sneaking into churches at night throughout Europe. And, especially in Catholicism, the wafer and the wine, right? I know there's different beliefs in different Christian groups. So they would see it as literally the body of Jesus and the blood of Jesus, of sneaking into churches and stabbing the host, reenacting the killing of Jesus. Now, Jews will be massacred and murdered for this, but you can imagine they come and say, you desecrated the host, and the Jews say, what's a host? I don't even know what you're talking about. It's an internal Christian kind of issue. So these have been realities. I remember years ago with a church group here in Israel, and we were talking about the blood libel. And this was another aha moment for me, because growing up Jewish, I knew all about the blood libel, but many Christians don't. And what's the blood libel? Jews would be accused of kidnapping a Christian child, reenacting somehow the killing of Jesus, usually around Passover time, same time period, draining his body of blood, and then using it to bake the matzah for Passover. Now, does this sounds so crazy, right? But you have there's still millions of Christians who believe it. And by the way, unfortunately, the Islamic world has adopted the blood libel. Well, we were discussing it in the group, and there was a lovely woman in the group, it's a Christian group from the US, who said, oh, she said, I never heard about this before. She says, but that's terrible. She says, we know that Jews don't do that anymore. Now, she didn't even hear what she said. The group heard it and they gasped. And she said, what? She says, oh, I said, I don't know where that came from. She says, I must have been taught this somewhere along the way, that this is what Jews do. And you can begin to understand the inordinate amount of criticism that's directed to the state of Israel, the collective of the Jewish people. They're absurd, but there's similar accusations that used to be in the towns and villages of Europe and the cities of Europe. We're accused of killing Arabs, of killing their children. It's unbelievable we're accused of, but what's really unbelievable is that people are willing to believe it. They've been what's the word? They've been educated over 1,000 years of this anti-Jewishness. So when they hear things about the Jewish state, oh, I said, yeah, that's what those Jews are like. They've been conditioned to believe this. So, you have, I mean, your stance is amazing, and we're so appreciative and grateful, but you've got very hard work. It's like you're pushing like a stone up a hill, and others are pushing it down, saying, no, you keep the Jews where they are. And I'm sure you get accusations of Judaizing and things of that sort. People who just cannot get past this idea that to be a good Christian, somehow you got to put down the Jews. What we say is, wow, this is just so exciting. I mean, look, it was a pagan world. We were the monotheists. And then along comes a group of pagans who say, we are going to connect to the God of Israel. Right. Wow, Christianity, fantastic. And you're not allowed to ask history, what if? But we do anyway. Yeah. And I always say, what if Jews and Christians have managed to say to each other, look, we've got things that we don't agree upon, but there's enough that unites us. We can walk together arm in arm, confronting this immoral pagan world. And yes, you'll do it your way, and I'll do it my way, but that's not what happened, unfortunately. And instead of working together to meet the challenges of a godless world out there, we ended up, unfortunately, mostly it was Christians turning on Jews, because even the Jews wanted to turn on Christians, we didn't have the power to do it. So it became an irrelevant kind of issue. But it's an unfortunate turn of history. It could have been so different.
Well, you know what? Let's look at today and moving forward, because we are with you. We stand shoulder to shoulder with you, and we are determined. Because why? I'm not crazy. Ann's not crazy, Mike. Why are we saying this now? Because we have seen what God has done for the Jewish people. And we have come to a new understanding, new for us, of covenant. Thank God our eyes have been opened, and we, excuse me, we are extremely honored and privileged to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and the Jewish people, because we want to worship the God that you worship. And yes, what defines how I define my salvation is different than how you define yours, but it's all okay. We serve the same God. And it is such a life-giving revelation to come to this understanding. For me personally, I know Mike and Ann and I have said this over and over for all of us, And so it's a new day. It's a new day for us. Ann and Mike, I know y'all want to say something. Mike, I see your hand up. Please unmute yourself and chime in, my friend.
Danny, thank you so much. Have you, I don't know all the things, I know you've made many videos and everything. Do you happen to have a series on this that if we have friends that don't know anything about what you're talking about, the persecution of Jews and the stupid things Christians have done all these years, do you recommend a video series or anything to share with people, or do you have anything like that?
Well, I might, and I'd send it to you. You know, I should have thought of that before we got on air together, but I didn't. So I don't have a thought off the top of my head, but maybe but there's definitely great resources, and I will
Yes.
work
I
on
have
that.
a thought. Let me add, forgive me for interrupting, but I have a thought to maybe that might help answer your question, Mike. You know, Yad Vashem has a curriculum that's designed for Christians. Danny, have you heard about this?
Oh yes, it's an excellent, excellent material.
I'm not sure if they're
Really
still
good.
doing that with the country shut down to so many people, but maybe their
What's
website.
really, well, the Yad Vashem website is a very good resource. A
Yes,
CFOIC website,
yes,
has some of the stuff that I've done, and but it's it's like anything. It's like it's like reading and learning, and it's a slow and painful kind of learning. But as I said, but as we've said, it has a freeing aspect to it.
mm,
Once you kind of get that, look, if you think, I mean, how do we know this is something that we should be doing? Because you look at most of the last 15 to 1800 years, there was no way for Jews and Christians to look at each other as friends, as brothers, as sisters, and to say what Laurie just said, we have different ways of doing things, but there's so much in common that we can do. Now, we didn't suddenly get smarter, right? I mean, that didn't happen. So to me, there's really only one answer. This is a door or a window that God has opened for us. And I think history also teaches us, God opens doors and windows, but you gotta walk through the door and you gotta open the window. If you don't, it closes after a while. And then you don't know when the next opportunity is going to come. So for me, it's been very exciting seeing. I mean, I've been, seeing this for 30 to 40 years already. And I was shocked when in the 1980s, when I started, encountering Christians who weren't an enemy, right? Didn't see me as a target, because again, as well-meaning as it might be, when someone comes and says, "Listen, I love you, and I want you to go to heaven, and therefore I'm going to bring you to Jesus." Well, it's well-intentioned, but that's not friendship. I'm a target.
that's
Yeah,
right.
you're
That's,
targeting me.
yeah,
Friendship says, I think you should do that, but I love you as you are, right? And I respect your right and your obligation as a human being to make your own choices. Uh, and let's find those things that unite us, and let's agree to disagree on the things that divide us. And I think if we have more of that attitude, there'll be more, and there'll be more opportunities for Jews and Christians. And look, I can see it. Back in the 80s and 90s, I was speaking in Orthodox synagogues in New York, all over the United States, about the idea of Jews and Christians speaking to each other. And today it's taken for granted. Of course we are in certain circles, but then it was not. If you remember, the Orthodox Jewish community was we're not going in that direction. And I met a number of rabbis saying to me, "Listen, Danny, you can speak about it. I'll invite you as a speaker. You can advocate." He says, I can't as a rabbi, because my people will say to me, you're supporting people who want to undermine the Jewish people. How can you do this? Today, I think, again, there's a lot of work to do still, but it's a lot of people have there's been enough encounters with Christians who are genuinely interested in standing with us, being with us. And when you get to be good friends, you can then discuss all the tough issues also, without trying to convince each other. I mean, I think that's also what friendship means. You exchange ideas without saying, okay, so you have this position, I'm going to change it to my position. No, I want to understand your position because I love you, I care about you. And that's, I think, part of this new door that's opened up, the ability to finally do that with each other that really just didn't exist before. So, the Zehayom Asa Adonai Nagida V'Nismecha Bo from Psalms. This is the day that God has made, and we should be joyful and celebrate that we have this opportunity to do this, because it didn't exist before. And if we don't grab it,
that's right.
who
That's
knows?
That's right. Danny, we are at the end of our time, but I just want to conclude by saying thank you for saying that, because that is really the connection to move forward, to grow this circle of friends, to enlarge our circle of Christians whose eyes become open. And I just want to speak to people who may be watching this recording, specifically to my Christian brothers and sisters. We love everybody, and I don't mean that shallow, in a shallow way. We truly love our Christian brothers and sisters, but we are putting out a call to action, and we are asking you to look at the history of the church. Please look and dig and ask questions and find out what we are talking about. It's all documented. It's all there. Look, dig, recognize, come to understand what happened and how we need to change that and repent of that, and trust us when we say everything Danny has said today is 100% accurate. There's a book called The List. Find it on Amazon. Get that book. That's a great starting place. There's several books. But please understand that this is a new day, and the Jewish people are in covenant. If you are stuck, my final comment, if you're a Christian and you're stuck and you can't get past what Danny was talking about, that we want to convert them to Jesus, and that's our only reason we want to even become their friend, you're missing it. That's not it. The Jewish people are in covenant with God. We need to walk shoulder to shoulder with them and bring the gospel to the nations, Anyway, we love you. So, Danny, we are so grateful for your time. Thank you for joining us live from Israel. Ann and Mike, do you have any closing comments?
We love you, Danny. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, yes, well, Danny, I hope to see you in Texas. And we're just, I think that you have a message to the church.
Yes.
I know the first time that I ever found out that Martin Luther was an anti-Semite, I was on the LL flight, and it was there was something about, there was 500 years for this and that and everything for Martin Luther, and it was a 500-year something, and it was a little article, and I couldn't believe it. Now, I was over 50 years old when I read that, and how I could, and I come from preachers in my family. John Calvin wasn't any better. No, hated the Jews. So these are things that we had to, it takes time. It takes time. And so come and talk to us about the Holocaust and our relationship. I hope to see you soon.
Amen.
As do I. Thank you.
Danny, thank you for your time, my friend. I hope to see you in Israel. Come to Texas.
Yes, Texas is good, but definitely come to Israel. Okay. And we're hoping. It looks like things are reopening. We are hoping.
Yeah, I'm beginning to hear a few buzzwords, so we hope so. Well, Danny, blessings to you until we can all meet together in person, either here or there. And for all of you guys watching, thank you for watching Just Among Friends. Please share this, and please join us again here on Just Among Friends. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.